We're now going to transition into our college football playoff predictions, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because, you know, if you guys are watching this, you guys are all huge college football fans, and you've heard it be hashed and rehashed 1,000 times, but we're going to at least give our take on it at least. Did the committee get it right with the 4 teams that are in the college football playoffs? And, you know, I landed a few different places. My mood changed quite a bit over the course of this past weekend, because when we had talked about all the different teams that could potentially make the college football playoff, you know, we had 7 or 8 teams that were in the mix going into this past weekend, and when going into the weekend, I was like, you know, maybe, you know, I've been a big fan of going to 12 teams just because I hated 4, but like maybe 12 is too many, because even with the 8 teams that we had this year going into it, I mean, we'd still have 4 more teams to fill if we went to 12 teams, and like, you know, this is the most teams we've ever had be in it this late in the year. Like maybe 12 is too many. Like maybe it's fine the way it is, kind of, like, you know, whatever. And then Alabama beats Georgia. And then I'm like, you know what? Because I was fairly certain. I was certain at the time, in the heat of the moment, I was fairly certain that we were going to see Michigan 1, Washington 2, Alabama 3, Georgia 4. That's what I thought we were going to see. And so if that had happened, I was prepared to go onto this podcast and go full, this is why we need 12 teams. This is because this can't keep happening where we decide at the beginning of the year that only one conference matters, and then we just pick and choose who matters from all the other conferences. Like there's no true power conferences. Even winning a Power 5 conference doesn't matter. Like I was prepared to go into that whole rant that I go into, you know, every single time we talk about this subject on the podcast. And then, you know, noon on Sunday rolls around, and we see the 4 teams, and I just kind of left going, it's kind of not the outcome I expected. You know, we knew Michigan was a lock with the win. We knew Washington was a lock with the win as well. So there's 2 of the 4 spots. I mean, Alabama had the best win of the weekend. They beating Georgia, the back-to-back defending champs, winners of 29 in a row, arguably the best resume win of any of the teams that were still in contention. But beyond that, you know, I hate to do this because I don't like. On the whole, I'm not a fan of the college football playoff committee. But I hate to bail them out, but I just don't think there was a right answer here. Because yes, Texas has 1 loss, but they beat Alabama. Another win that's up there as far as the best resume wins of the year, and they won resoundingly over Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game. So are you going to leave them out and put Bama in? Like, those are the 2 teams that those are the 2 teams that I guess, you know, I know Florida State had a big resume win over LSU, but if you were to rank the resume wins of all the teams over the course of the year, now granted, you know, Michigan doesn't really have that big resume win. I guess they do over Ohio State, and Washington
and Penn State.
Well, with the way Penn State's looked this year,
well, you win into Penn State and you beat a top 15 Penn State team.
Okay, well,
without your head coach.
But even still, so I mean, if you were to rank between those 3 teams, then if you were to rank them, go Alabama's win over Georgia is 1, Texas's win over Alabama is 2, and then Florida's win over LSU is 3, based on how those teams have performed, because you rank those teams, Georgia's 1, Alabama's 2, LSU's 3. Or even if you want to flip-flop 1 and 2, we can still agree that LSU is 3. You know, and Oklahoma State and Louisville, you know, talking about, you know, Texas winning resoundingly over Oklahoma State. OK State and Louisville, who FSU beat in the ACC title game, were ranked about the same. So you compare those 2 wins, one team beat their, you know, fringe top 20 team by, you know, by a large margin, and the other one struggled with their fringe top 20 team. It's not fair. It probably should have been Florida State at 3, Bama at 4. You know, because what the thing that's odd to me is why we put so much emphasis, because to me, I think the easiest conclusion we can leave at, like I said, is putting Florida State at 3 and Alabama at 4. I think that would have been the easiest. You still get the SEC, but here's the thing, because why are we so stuck? Like, why does the Texas Alabama head to head matter more than like literally anything else? Like, that's what it seems like. So like we don't care. We care about preserving that aspect of the regular season more than we care about preserving the like Florida State going undefeated aspect. We care more about preserving that one game, that one outcome, more than any of the outcomes of the entire Florida State season. Why is that one outcome more important than the entire Florida State season? And I understand that I sat here and argued that Florida State shouldn't be in last week. I will say that it was partly because I thought they would lose to Louisville, and I thought this would all work itself out. But like, I'm just saying, like, it's so odd that like that was the one hiccup. That they're like, well, we can't rank the team that beat the other. We can't rank Texas below Alabama because Texas beat Alabama. Well, yeah, but Florida State also went undefeated. Why do we care? Why do we care so much about making sure Texas is in and in ahead of Alabama more than we care about if Florida State goes undefeated and literally takes care of every team on their schedule? So like that was the odd thing to me. But I mean, like we also talked about last week, and like it's been rehashed 1,000 times, Florida State is not the same team as they were with their starting quarterback. It stinks to say this. And I think the conclusion we can get to at the end of the day is, thank goodness we get 12 teams next year, because that takes it out of the hands of the committee. We might still see some weird, shady committee things next year, but at least there's not going to be these weird, random, goalposts that get moved every year.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State's argument still is first year of playoff. One loss, Ohio State gets in with their third string quarterback. But they're also their third string quarterback helped dismantle a Wisconsin team in the Big Ten championship. They didn't struggle in a low scoring affair against a lesser opponent. Honestly, I'm on the side that the committee did not get it right. I do believe you needed to you did need to reward Florida State because that defense is so good for their undefeated season. And unfortunately, that would have, at that point, that would have left the SEC out, in my opinion. And yeah, you would have had to explain that. But look, that head-to-head of Texas and Alabama, that was a big deal. I think it wouldn't have been as big of a deal for in the committee's mind with Texas had Texas beaten Alabama on a neutral site or at Texas. But the fact that win came in Tuscaloosa, I mean, even if you look at like the net rankings in basketball, that win would have been a tier 1 win. That is a big, big, big win as far as a resume goes. And then they lost to at that time a highly ranked Oklahoma on a neutral site. So their one loss did not come at home. It came on a neutral site in a rivalry game, which is taken into account, I would believe. Honestly, I think this thing could have been played out a whole lot better if Georgia just would have handled business and beaten Alabama. Because then you would have had Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, and Florida State.
You probably would have had Florida State 4, I think, because then you wouldn't. You wouldn't have had a reason, because you still wouldn't. You wouldn't, because the whole thing is they wanted to make sure Texas was ahead of Alabama. Right.
It would have been 4 undefeated teams, and you could have. That's why we picked. But because Alabama won, they just could not put Alabama in and not Texas. Especially, I mean, I think had Jordan Travis been healthy and still playing for Florida State, I do believe we'd see Florida State in there though.
Mm.
Right now, it really does come down to that. And the committee they've come out and said in the past, look, that does go into a deciding factor for us. If you are down a player that is a star player for you, that is a huge contributor, we do factor that into our decisions.
Yeah. I am just glad, thankfully, that we're going to 12 teams next year. I'm very glad. I know that goes without saying. There's a lot of people that are, I'm not breaking any news here by saying, I think a lot of people are going to be relieved going to the 12 teams because I'm not I don't know if it's still the 12 teams that was originally like thrown out there, where it was like, hey, it's going to be all the Power 5, now Power 4 conference champions, and then the highest ranked group of 5, and then the rest are going to be filled without larges. I don't know if that's still going to be the format. But at least there's going to be some semblance of structure. Yes, you're going to have the top 12 in. You're not going to have the same chaos factor that you had this year, but at least, conference championships are still going to mean something, because if, Iowa...
Probably more because it's an automatic bid now.
Right, exactly. Because if Iowa had beat Michigan, Iowa's in. Michigan's still in as an at-large, but that boots one team that was going to be in over Iowa. Now that team's on the outside looking in. You see more of that kind of thing happening, which will be a lot more fun than... Hey, does this team that did all the things right all year, do they get to be in? Oh, I guess not, because they lost their starting quarterback at the end of the year. Because, I was thinking about this earlier today, too. I was like, it's so odd that we seem to think, as college football fans, we seem to think that, the college football national champion needs to be this, perfectly handled, intense, insane process. There could be no champion that is potentially just a team that got hot at the right time. Let's say, so this same Alabama team that got in because they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Let's say they lose to Texas at the beginning of the year. They were really close to losing to USF in Tampa.
And Auburn.
But here's my point though. Let's say they had lost to USF. They've got 2 losses. So the way the college football playoff is currently, they'd be eliminated. Everything else plays out the exact same. They would not get the same team that's getting a chance to play, that just beat Georgia, that's getting a chance to play for a national championship, that we say is definitely one of the best 4 teams, and that's why they're above Florida State. They wouldn't be able to play under the current format because they lost that second game, but because they're getting hot at the right time, they would be able to play in that 12-team playoff. That's why more playoff teams and not doing it in this insanely archaic, we're going to just be subjective about it and do this weird deserving versus do this weird other way of doing it. It's going to be a lot better when there's more teams to do it. When there's more teams to be able to put in there, because, like I said, this Alabama team, if they lost that game to USF, wouldn't be able to play. But yet, because they won that game, they're now, in a better position to actually go win the whole thing. And we think of them still in the same light, even though they almost lost that game back in week 3. So I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about, but I'm kind of getting to a rambling point here, but all I'm trying to say is it's going to be a lot better with 12 teams.
Well, yeah, just look at basketball. It's never the top 4, hardly ever the top 4 teams that are playing in the Final Four.
Right.
Look at last year.
San Diego State was the only team ranked in the top 20 at the beginning of the year. So, and they didn't even win. It was UConn.
No.
Yeah.
So it's going to allow a team that's getting hot at the right time. Heck, it's going to set up for a potential. I think Liberty would have been in the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
And it's going to set up for a potential for a team like Liberty to come in there and maybe win it all, or maybe in the opportunity for somebody you thought was going to win it all, put their season to an end. So yeah, I'm excited for the 12 teams. And besides, it's going to make more bowl games that are um, valuable and playing for something. So you're going to see fewer opt outs
Right.
and
Okay.
transfers from those schools.
Quickly here, because we spent more time than I originally anticipated on that. We need to go ahead and pick the college football playoff, and say who we think is going to ultimately win the whole darn thing. It's going to be the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. In the Rose Bowl, Michigan versus Alabama. I'm going Alabama over Michigan here. I'm mainly going off of vibes. It doesn't seem to matter how good Michigan has looked going into the playoffs these last 2 years. No matter what the stats have said, they've wound up on the losing end. Their defense is first as far as points allowed goes. The only team allowing fewer than 10 points per game, which is the best it's been in the 3-year stretch of them making the playoff. But I'm just not super confident in them getting it done. So I'm going with Bama here. I think Bama wins the Rose Bowl and makes it to the national championship game. In the Sugar Bowl, I've got Washington over Texas. It's really close, but I'm going with the Huskies. I was really impressed with what they did against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. I tried looking for clues for this one because these two teams played in the Alamo Bowl last year, and I was trying to get into like what statistics kind of stuck out, and guess what? It was real similar. There wasn't really anything that stood out. Both teams, played pretty evenly. I'm leaning Washington though because the Huskies are first in passing yards in the Pac-12, and Texas ranks towards the bottom against the pass in the Big 12, and their one loss came against the top passing offense in the conference in Oklahoma. So give me the dog. So I think that shapes up to be a Washington versus Alabama national championship game.
In the Rose Bowl, I actually have Michigan over Alabama. I think Michigan's defense is what puts them over the edge here. I mean, yeah, we're not. I don't want to get back into that, but Alabama's beatable. We know they are. I mean, almost losing to USF, almost losing to Auburn, they're beatable. I think one of the only teams that's in the top 4 that just does not look beatable is Michigan. Michigan's had 2 close games all year, and one of them was to Ohio State. The other one being to Maryland, but that Michigan defense is good. On the side note, funny meme I saw today, a picture of Jim Harbaugh screaming on the sidelines and saying, "What do you mean we have to play Alabama? I had the signals for Florida State." So yeah, thought that was funny. But yeah, I got Michigan to win the Rose Bowl. Besides, it's only fitting. It's the last time that there's going to be a true tie-in to the Big Ten to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. Also, quick aside. Screw Georgia for ruining the last Pac-12 Big Ten Rose Bowl, because that's what it would have been if Georgia would have just handled their business. It would have been Michigan versus Washington in the Rose Bowl for the last time. I'm assuming that's how they would have done it, because it would have been Georgia versus whoever in the Sugar Bowl. I'm assuming that's where they would have sent it. Because I know the true 3 matchup is Washington, Texas, and that's the Sugar Bowl. But I mean, I don't think they care too much. Like, I think they would have just flip flopped it. I don't know, but I don't think it has.
They still got a Big Ten team,
right?
And then in the Sugar Bowl, I'm actually going to go with Texas over Washington. Texas has found another gear since that Oklahoma loss, and you're seeing them play at the same level that they did when they beat Alabama. And Texas looks like a team on a mission right now with the way they've handled business the last few weeks. And I can see that continuing on into the playoffs. So my national championship setup is Michigan versus Texas. It's kind of a classic.
Yeah, I like that.
Two historic programs.
Yeah. I think the last time they played was the 2005 Rose Bowl. That was Vince Young right before he went and won the national championship with Texas.
Now, will say I would love to see a rematch of that BCS Bowl game from the Rose Bowl when Texas lost to Alabama after Colt McCoy went down, like the very beginning of the game. And then because in that game, Greg McElroy was quarterback for Alabama and threw for like 58 yards. And the only reason why Alabama wins that game is because they have a two-headed monster of Mark Ingram and Trenton Richardson
Right.
at running back that ran for over 200 yards each almost and 4 touchdowns combined. So,
yeah.
And then Greg McElroy comes out and says, well, the reason Florida State gets left out is because you just can't win with mediocre quarterback play.
Yeah, right. I saw that too.
Yeah. Let's check that receipt, shall we?
Exactly. All right, so my national championship game, my pick, I've got Washington versus Alabama, and I'm actually going to go off vibes again. I'm going with the Huskies. The Washington Huskies beat Alabama, and the reason I'm going off of vibes here is because prior to this season, the last time the Pac-12 made the college football playoff was 2016, and guess what matchup that was? That was Washington versus Alabama, and the Tide rolled in that game. I'm pretty sure it was in the Sugar Bowl, and I think it was at the old no, was it the Sugar Bowl? I'm pretty sure it was in the Georgia Dome, if I remember correctly. So it must have been the Peach Bowl. But regardless, the Tide had went off in that game, and the Pac-12 was shunned since then and hasn't really been back since. So how fitting would it be in the final year of the Pac-12 for the conference to exact their revenge and go out in style? I want one last national championship for the Pac-12 to send them.
And then the Big Ten claims it.
Right, exactly. Send them into that good night. Washington wins the national championship. Michael Penix Jr. gets, the MVP. He goes off, and the Huskies are your national champions. That's who I'm going with.
My national championship is Michigan versus Texas. Give me the Texas Longhorns. Hook them to a national championship. I just think that Texas offense is rolling right now. And not only is their offense rolling, their special teams is rolling as well. They're putting up points. And Michigan hasn't run into anybody that's been able to put up points like that this year. Even Ohio State wasn't able to put up points quite as much as they have in the past. So I like Texas. Like I said, they're playing on a mission. Michigan they're playing somewhat on a mission as well for Jim Harbaugh, and screw you to the entire NCAA and all that. But give me Texas. The former Buckeye quarterback beats the Michigan Wolverines, beats that team up north.